Alright, we have a 1910 Ford little tractor and it needs a clutch. So, took the loader off. If you need help taking a quick attach loader off, then you might not want to do a clutch because it's pretty straightforward. So we'll skip that part of the video, get right to the point. First thing you want to do is make sure it's not out of adjustment. So the linkages usually have some sort of threaded rod. You can see this one's all the way back. And when I took the linkage off, there's no free play in this linkage. There should be this linkage should be able to move back and forth about an inch, and that is your release fork. Pushing on your release bearing, it needs to have a gap in between that bearing and the fingers on the clutch. And if there's no gap there, the release bearing will be spinning all the time, and your clutch will release right at the very top of the pedal. As soon as you put your foot on the clutch, it's going to stop the tractor, and then it'll start slipping, because what's happening as your clutch plate wears, your clutch disc, your fingers come out and they come closer and closer to that release bearing. When they start hitting all the time, it's time to replace the clutch. Make sure that if you have a hydraulic clutch like the Zeters, we got caught with that before, is that it could just be a master or slave cylinder not pushed on the clutch. You feel like you have no pedal whatsoever, and you don't split the whole tractor when it's just a hydraulic failure. This one, the tank is loose, so we'll probably just take the tank off, disconnect the fuel line, probably just take off the tie rod end and then split it right down the middle. Support your back somehow. You can either roll the front forward or the back back, doesn't really matter, whatever you like. But before you do anything, that's why you watch the video right to the end, is you take a block and you stick it in between the front axle and the frame, because otherwise as soon as you roll this thing forward, it's going to tip because that axle is able to pivot, right? So don't forget that first thing you put on out of anything after a clutch adjustment check, and then we'll start splitting it. So here we go. That's the biggest little clutch I've ever seen. Okay, we're taking the clutch apart. Just make sure you pull it off even, and then this is your PTO clutch here, then this is your drive clutch, which is right up against the flywheel. that was the drive clutch. There's supposed to be some lining on that side, but yeah, there's no line. So, good news is that because the lining is on this side, was on this side, this is probably okay. So the pressure plate and the PTO clutch are probably fine. There's lots of lining on the PTO, and because it's a loader tractor, this takes all the abuse. So, and even this isn't too, like the finish isn't that bad. I'll resurface it. I'll take, here's some of the clutch lining there. Whatever you machine off here, you have to machine off here. And then it's as good as new. So we'll get a new disc ordered, take this off, machine it, roll it back together. So here we go. I didn't have a nut big enough to, or sock, maybe I did, but anyway, chisel works fine. It's been done before. I had to heat the flywheel up though, because it's keyed on. I just had to heat up the center, and I just kind of heated this little area a little extra by the key. What that does is open it up, and then put a pry bar behind one of the bolts at the back there, and it popped right off. So we'll turn it down a little bit and pop it right back on again. Flywheel machine, just did that in the lathe. We got a video on how to do that if you want to watch that, so I'm not going to. We'll put the link right here, and you can see how we do that. If you're going into high power stuff, you might want to use a surface grinder, but on a mill, but we are just doing all of 3 cylinders in a little 50-year-old Ford, so I'm sure it'll be alright. Here's a trick to get that stupid pilot bearing out. Just fill it with grease and find something that fits the hole. All I could find was a drill bit that actually fit. Don't use a drill bit because they shatter. Try to find a punch or a bolt or something, but see how it kind of popped out there? Let me see. Oh, there you go. There you go. Put some more grease in there. Smoosh it in there. Put it in. Every time it comes out a bit more, put a little bit more grease in there. Almost. Get grease all over your nicely new machined flywheel. Coming or not? Oh, it's coming right through the bearing. See, this is why YouTube sucks, because you set up the camera and you think it's gonna work and it never works. And then you turn the camera off and it works great. It's deceiving because the grease makes it look like the bearing's coming out, but it's not. Okay, never mind. Jamming the drill bit in there and then just wiggling it. I might be able to get it out. It's coming! Ha! I got it. Another cheap ass bearing. The grease was coming around the seal on the outside there. See that? When you stick that in there, the grease has nowhere to go and pushes on that. It's such a shitty bearing that the grease was going right on the inside there. And which means that the dirt was going in there too, which is why this bearing feels like shit. But we'll pop the new one in. Hopefully it's better quality. Okay, another issue that we got here is this shaft that pushes on the bearing. I should be able to move this nice and free, and I'm trying, I'm not just grunting. There it goes, see? Jumped. Yeah, it needs to be more free than that. So these are the forks that push on the bearings here, and because the shaft is so tight, there's a tiny little spring here that pulls back on the probably not original, but this little spring pulls back on the release bearing so that the release bearing doesn't ride up against the fingers all the time. So there's probably so much clutch dust jammed up in there. We'll kind of scoop the majority of it out and dispose of that in a environmentally proper manner. Don't get too carried away because it just gets dusty again, but we'll lube that all up and make that turn nice and free. And I don't think that spring is enough actually to pull it back. Probably put a heavier spring on the pedal itself. That makes more sense to me. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, so much better. Except, no, I knocked it off because I got too excited. A little tighter spring. Now it's going to snap back and jam my finger in there, and I'm going to swear. Oh, it's not bad. All right. Usually, me working on Fords ends up me swearing, so much better. I'm gonna put the clutch on. I don't have a pilot for it, so line it up by eye and then roll it back together. I gotta get this thing out of here. One thing I forgot, when the fingers on the clutch, they have an adjustment on it. Just take like a vernier, make sure that each one is even, because otherwise, when you step on the pedal, you'll feel it vibrate because it's only hitting one at a time. And you'll release your clutch uneven. So camera died, battery died, but pretty straightforward. So yeah, here we go. And so that's what a good clutch looks like. It's so quiet. Not like this old one. We can give this one to Gary. He can play the tambourine in the band. Throw this thing on. What you want to do is just put enough tension on it that you can kind of tap the clutch over until it's centered, and but the pressure plate will hold it in place. And I think that's got it. And then just snug her up nice and even. Star pattern. You got her. Let's see. Camera, which way am I supposed to go? Left, right? I can do it. Come on. Come on. If it goes together too smooth, you probably forgot a shaft. Okay, so she's all back together again. Basically, when you're rolling back together, make sure that your gaps are even, that you're not wider at the top or on the sides than you are on the other side, and eventually that input shaft will pop into the pilot bearing. Just button everything back up the way that it was. You want a little bit of free play. There's a spring missing on the pedal, so I'm gonna get one of those in town. Let's throw the loader back on, and that's about it. Give a little tractor, and clean that rad out for him so it doesn't overheat. We just check the fluids real quick, give it a grease, and back she goes to the customer. Alright, it is pretty freaking cold out here. I had to change the glow plug because this one was burned out. You can see the gap there. Anyway, when you turn it on, it would just start smoking right away. Customer had a key switch for it, so I threw that in real quick for it too. We'll see, it's like -7 degrees Celsius. We'll see if it's got enough oomph to start in the morning. I don't know how this battery is. I think the battery is the determining factor, but we'll see if it starts good with the 3 glow plugs. This tractor actually glows it while you're cranking it too, which is odd. If fuel hits a red hot glow plug, it'll put little spots in it, burn it out. But I think this engine has a pre-combustion chamber, so that doesn't really matter. Actually, that's starting better than I thought it would. Nice little knock there, and it shakes like crazy. All my wrenches are going flying. There's a screwdriver. It's winter now, so I'm gonna lose all these tools because they're gonna disappear under the snow. Ah, it just needs a boost. I almost started.
You're watching?
You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching.
You guys are watching?
You're watching.
What? The boss garage.
Subscribe.